Factoring is the most important skill in algebra. If you're getting ready to take an advanced test like the GRE or the GMAT, maybe you've been out of college or out of school for a while, might have gotten a little rusty, but factoring is more important than everything else combined. Let's do a quick review of the opposite of factoring of distribution. Let's say I have a plus 5 times a plus 3. Here's what I do. I first do a times a, I get a squared. Then I do a times 3, get plus 3a. Then I do 5 times a, I get 5a, and 5 times 3, and that's just 15. At this point, I see, are there any things that I can combine, any like terms? And yes, the 3a and the 5a are like terms. So I write this a squared plus 8a plus 15. So we call that distribution. You can call that multiplying out, whatever. Now, factoring is doing that in reverse. It means, let's say this is the question. And let's say that the answer we're trying to get back to the original thing that we have. So let's say that this is the question. This thing that I've circled here is the question, and we need to somehow factor it. That means the result that we're trying to get, the answer would be a plus 5 times a plus 3. Now the question is, though, how are we going to get that? You can do it with a lot of trial and error, and there's going to be a lot of trial and error involved. Factoring is much, much harder than distribution because you have to just kind of guess what the right thing is and then test it out and see what happened. And so in this video, I'm going to show you what it's actually like. Most people can't do factoring, and that means they can't do anything that involves factoring. Honestly, a lot of advanced algebra. Not because they can't do it, but because they think they have to get it right on their first try. But you don't need to get it right on your first try. Factoring, you might take 5, 6, maybe even 10 tries to factor something. If it's very difficult, take 20 tries, and that's fine. Now, for younger kids, factoring is very difficult, not because they can't do the math, because they don't have the psychological resilience. They think that in order to do something, you have to be able to do it right the first time. Obviously, you guys being a little bit older, having more experience, you know that a lot of things take multiple tries. Anything worthwhile takes multiple tries, and factoring will often take multiple tries. So I'm going to walk through what it actually looks like. Let's say I'm trying to factor this. A squared plus 7a plus 12. And I need to figure out what two things multiply together to get me this. And I could just sit here and just guess numbers all day long and make myself crazy, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure I get the first term and the last term right. So I'm going to make sure, so I'm going to first realize that I'm going to kind of put into two things. I need to get the a squared, and the way to get the a squared is to get an a in the first thing and an a in the second thing. And I'm going to make sure that I get the 12. Now, there's a lot of different things that multiply out to 12. 6 and 2 does, 3 and 4 does, 12 and 1 does. And so I'm just going to pick one of those. Let's say I pick 7 and 2. So I can make this a plus 6 and a plus 2. I multiply this out. I get a squared plus 2a plus 6a plus 12. I combine like terms. I get a squared plus 8a plus 12. Oh, it was close, right? But here's the good news. I got the first term a squared right and the last term 12 right. I didn't even think about the middle term. You shouldn't worry about the middle term at all. I'm just going to try something else. What else can multiply to 12? 3 and 4 can. So I'm going to try a plus 3, a plus 4. Multiply it out with these multiplication arrows. So I get a squared plus 4a plus 3a plus 12, or a squared plus 7a plus 12. And in this case, I got it right on my second try. That wasn't too hard for me because I came up with the problem, right? In factoring, you're going to often try out many, many things. You might need 5, 10, 15, 20 tries. Factoring isn't really a test of math. It's a test of your psychological resilience. Here's the real key. The only trick, the only technique you need to worry about is this. Make sure you get the first term right and make sure you get the last term right. Let's do another one. Let's say I have a squared plus 7a plus 10. I'm only going to worry about the first term, a squared, and the last term, 10. I'm not even going to worry about the middle term. And I just say, what multiplies to 10? 5 and 2 do. I multiply this out. I get a times a, that's a squared. I get a times 2, that's 2a. I get 5 times a, which is 5a. And I get 5 times 2, which is 10. And I get a squared plus 7a plus 10. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why focus on the last term? Why not focus on the middle term? It's because the last term is going to have fewer choices. If I think about what numbers multiply out to 10, I have 5 and 2, and I have 10 and 1, and that's basically it. Now if I say what numbers add up to 7, well, sure, you have 5 and 2, you have 6 and 1, you have 7 and 0, you have 8 and negative 1, you have 2, so you have 3 and 4, you have negative 5 and 8. I mean, you have a lot of things. You have an infinite number of things, an infinite number of integers that will add up to 7. But the last term is just going to have fewer choices, just not that many things multiply to 10. Make sure you always get the first term and the last term right. You might have to do maybe 5, 10 guesses. As you get more comfortable with it, you might only need to do 2 or 3 guesses. Sometimes you might get lucky on your first try and do it on your first guess. But if you remember that factoring is a test of resilience, and if you remember to get your first term and your last term right, not worry about the middle term, you're going to find factoring to be A, easier than maybe it was the first time you learned it, and B, a very useful tool for a very large number of GRE, GMAT, and other advanced problems.